in a certain pavilion that is located in the Jeongan Manor, Xingxi County. A child is being carefully examined by a noble physician. After the examination, the father asked the physician about his findings. The physician told the father that the child will have a very hard time living past the age of 20 due to the child's body constitution. But the father didn't care about the baby, and instead the father blamed the baby for his wife's death due to his birth, and even calling it as a heaven's punishment. The physician was in disbelief upon hearing the father of a child that will be dying at a young age. The physician explained the condition of the child to the father, and it was similar to a 9 yin meridians, but in the case of the baby, it has his Baihui acupoint open to the extreme. When the father heard about acupoint, he asked if he was referring to the acupoint on top of the head. The physician confirmed and explained that a person will die soon enough if their Baihui acupoint is too open. It refers to a deity ascension. These are sometimes used by absolute martial masters, where they use their upper meridian of their head. And it is also when someone is too drunk on the energy of the great nature, and dies because they can't withstand it. Upon hearing it, the father realized something and stood up, saying that he was right, that it was a heavenly punishment. He told the physician to go back, and he will call his chief steward to pass him his pay. The physician was so shocked and angry upon hearing what the father of the child said and walked off. The physician was so sad about the faith of the child. He thought if that child was born in an unorthodox sect or a demonic faction, he can become a heavenly demon, or if in a Shaolin temple, he would have been able to use the Shaolin 72 elite training methods 2 times over. But faith is just too harsh for that child to be born hated as such a place, and will die young in the countryside, unless he can achieve enlightenment on his own. Decades later, in a dining table with the whole family, the father told his family about how his own father, the founder of the clan, who is a disciple of the Jeongan sect's Seonjeomja, and that he dedicated his whole life reviving the clan. He mentioned that he will not close down their clan's business, because he might learn the ultimate technique of the Jeongan sect, and was also really happy about his son joining the Jeongan sect following the footsteps of his father. The whole family was really happy upon hearing their son or brother managed to join the Jeongan sect, but one of his sons noticed that the protagonist is missing, and told his father that he is still not here yet. The hateful father told his son that he told the protagonist to stay at the training hall so that he can't join the joyous occasion, and that the protagonist will only bring ill omens. And at this moment, the protagonist is standing in the middle of the training hall, concentrating and releasing an overwhelming aura, and after that, he realized that he now completely mastered their clan's movement arts. With this movement art, the protagonist can stimulate his muscles with energy and compress it, making his body stronger. He was also hopeful that with a stronger body, he might now have a longer lifespan. The protagonist told his brother that he redeveloped their clan's exclusive martial arts, but the reaction of his brother is a little off. His brother told the protagonist that it is better to not tell anyone about it. Yonshin, the protagonist, was shocked and was not convinced by it. He told his other brother about his newly created martial arts, but his other brother was angry, telling him that he might experience energy deviation and die if he learned his martial arts. And his father was very angry upon knowing it. He criticized the protagonist because his father thought that he made a mess of their own exclusive martial arts, and sarcastically asked the protagonist if he was the founder of their clan. He now knew what his brother meant about not telling anyone about it. The protagonist never thought about much when he was creating a martial art. He only did it because he wanted to become healthy and live with everyone in his family. There was a commotion outside, because it was the day when the martial masters of the Jeongan sects visit their family. The Jeongan sect is one of the twin walls that are known for being the strongest groups in Shaanxi alongside Manhwa sect. It is also one of the 9 great sects of the world. The protagonist wanted to meet them in person, but the chief steward told him not to even show his face to their guest, and it was his father's order. The protagonist was shocked upon hearing it, while the steward is very apologetic towards the protagonist, but the current situation made him curious about those skilled masters, and forced him to think that it might be fine as long as he can see them from afar. The people around are very curious on who will be coming to their clan, which is also a great honor to them. When the Jeongan sect masters were already at their gates, they saw a very beautiful lady who is also a noble race. They were so surprised to see a noble race. They are known to be a mysterious race that can live on forever, and other humans think that they are also deities. They can also feel the condensed core energy, which is being exuded out of her body naturally. The protagonist's father introduced himself as the patriarch, and is also utterly honored to be visited by them. The noble race introduced herself as Yoil Shin, an elder of the Jeongan sect, and was also happy about their hospitality. Upon hearing her introduction, the people were so surprised that they bowed, and asked for forgiveness for not recognizing a deity. Yo Il-sin urged them to raise their heads, because she was not here to show off her status. Young Damyong urged them to go inside the house and rest. While they were walking, they noticed the people in the surrounding being so respectful to them, but the noble race noticed something. She looked at the protagonist, and the protagonist just greeted her. When his father sees them greeting each other, the protagonist is introduced as his third son, while the protagonist walks away. When the noble race woman told his father that he is a bright kid, the father disagreed, and told the noble race that he is the troublemaker of his family, and was embarrassed about it. When the protagonist goes back to the training hall, he gains a new perspective upon seeing the martial masters of the Jeongan sect, since he can't gain any more on their own exclusive movement art. He will now practice swordsmanship. After resting in their own room, the Jeongan sect martial masters thought that the place was better than they were expecting, and with much earth energy, they knew that the tyrant sword tribe would want it. They were actually planning to sacrifice the Jeong clan, and were planning for a counterattack with the tyrant sword tribe. The other two martial masters ask if they can just attack and destroy them before they can cross the walls, but the noble race woman was worried because they will face the 13 skies, and were the most problematic bunch in the tyrant sword tribe, and they should not let their guard down. But the noble race woman kept recalling about the protagonist, because he clearly stood out among the most in the Jeong clan. At that night the protagonist is meditating, and was wondering why his Baihui acupoint is so open, even though he just focused only on making his body stronger. Now he can feel a greater amount of energy that goes through his head, and was worried that he might have less than 5 years before he will lose consciousness, and now he is scared thinking he has less than 5 years to live. But at that moment, he was startled, because he could feel an ominous energy coming from the main house. When the protagonist was going to the main house area, he felt something off, because the closer he got, the stronger the scent of blood was, and it was also too quiet. He noticed that he passed through a trap formation, and saw a lot of people murdered on the street. He now realized that there is something happening in the Jeong manor, and saw that the dead people around him were part of the Jeong clan. At that moment, he saw a bunch of people sorting out the people that they killed, and mocked him for not hiding, even though he is still alive. The man before him told the protagonist that he is only killing him because he was ordered to, and as he was about to attack the protagonist just stood and grabbed the enemy's hand so hard that it broke the arm of the enemy. The enemy is now on the floor kneeling due to the pain of his broken arm. The enemies were now on alert, and asked who he was, and the protagonist introduced himself as the third son of the Jeong clan. The protagonist was discharging some great aura. The man with the broken arm was so angry, and was about to attack the protagonist again, but he was beheaded by the protagonist, while the protagonist was not even looking at him. He proceeded in attacking the other enemies. He used a technique called the Scripture of Origin ability. He slashed 2 enemies that were near him, and proceeded to attack the other 2, slashing their neck, hands, or their torso. He then attacked the remaining enemies by stabbing or slashing any part of their bodies, and killing them all. This was also the first time he trained the delightful sword, and now he gets how it should work. But after a moment later, there are new enemies popping up. They also mocked him, and thought that they were only killed because they let their guard down. They were also impressed about his mastery of the delightful sword, despite his young age. The protagonist asks if they were from the Blood Flame cult, and the enemy answered that the ones he killed were from the Blood Flame cult, and they were different. They were actually from the Tyrant Sword Tribe. Upon hearing it, the protagonist was shocked to know that the Blood Flame cult and the Tyrant Sword Tribe, which are both from the 13 skies, which are also said to be the most cruel and powerful in all of Muram, are now here on their Jeong manor. The protagonist asked them what they were doing in their clan, and they answered that it was none of his business. Seeing that they are only answering him and not attacking, the protagonist asks them if they knew about him. The enemies were a little startled, and the protagonist said that their family is part of the Desolate Fortress, which is the best branch sect in Muram. The protagonist told them that it would be a pain, even if they are part of the 13 skies, if they killed him. But at that moment they were interrupted due to a great attack at their back, and the protagonist noticed that it was actually the martial master from the Jeongan sect. He also sees the noble racewoman Yeoshin jumping above him. But after landing, the noble racewoman was kneeling down due to some injury. The protagonist was shocked to see this, and realized that their enemy should be a strong one. At that very moment, the protagonist felt a very strong pressure coming from his back. When he looked behind, he saw a man standing while emanating a strong aura. The protagonist wonders who it was, and he can also feel an ominous energy coming from him. When the person looked at the protagonist, his head felt light just from making eye contact with him. The protagonist now realizes that the person is actually the leader of the Tyrant Sword Tribe, because the enemies in front of him were now kneeling while greeting their tribe leader. The protagonist was wondering why this man, who is considered as the harbinger of disasters in Jeongan, is here in his clan. Seeing the conditions of the martial masters of the Jeongan sect, the protagonist realized that they are as good as dead. Then if that is so, the protagonist starts to attack to test himself, and he kills one of his enemies, shocking everyone. Yeonshin then asks the leader of the tyrant sword tribe if he can kill him, even if he killed one of his persons. The other members of the tribe were so angry preparing to attack the protagonist, but the leader of the tribe stopped them. The tribe leader then said that the protagonist's spirit is better than anyone there combined. The people around them were shocked to hear the tribe leader praising the protagonist. He also said that he will not kill the protagonist. But the protagonist corrected the tribe leader by saying that he can't kill him. The protagonist then revealed that he was the only grandson of the former divine sword squad leader of the Desolate Fortress. The noble racewomen were shocked upon hearing the revelation of the protagonist. The tribe leader then confirmed that it is definitely not a good idea to be involved with the Desolate Fortress. But it was not the reason why he let him live. It was actually that the tribe leader liked his temperament and spirit, which is what a powerful martial artist in the Jeongan needs. He would have taken him as a disciple if he weren't related to the Desolate Fortress. Then the tribe leader told him that he will give him one day for him to leave this place, and he also said that he doesn't want any other sects or clans to step foot in that place. When the tribe leader was leaving, he told the protagonist that he is open for a duel and to come find him when he wants to take revenge. After that, all members of the Tyrant Sword tribe followed their leader, leaving the protagonist and the martial masters of the Jeongan sect. When he was inside the main house, he saw his father full of wounds and nearing his death, alongside the other members of the clan that were already dead. He called out his father, and when his father looked at him, his father asked why he was so strong, and the protagonist answered that it was because of his clan's movement arts, which he created and mastered. When his father heard it, he remembered the day when Yeonshin told him about the martial arts that the protagonist created, which made him so mad that day. Then his father realized that it was actually the sacred arts that created by their own clan. He regretted and admitted that he was ignorant and foolish, and now that his third son created a sacred art of their clan. He told the protagonist that he has the qualities of a founder, and at his final moments, he now accepted the protagonist, that he is his own son. At the death of his own father, the atmosphere added to the mournful event, and while his brother was crying, the protagonist called the chief steward and asked if his little Haya is okay. The steward told him that she is still sleeping after her acupoint got blocked. He told the protagonist that they deliberately blocked her acupoint so that they could safely hide her from the killers or enemies. After that, the protagonist told his brother to raise his Haya in the Jeongan sect because their Haya has an exceptional affinity with the 5 elements, so they are sure to also take her in. At that moment, Elder Yeolshin called the protagonist to inform him that they are leaving now. She mentioned that, since the leader of the Tyrant Sword tribe is now involved, they are to first report this one to their sect without delay. She then asked the protagonist if he is going back to the Desolate Fortress where his mother's family lives. The protagonist affirmed it, since he doesn't have anywhere to go or to get stronger now. But at that moment, Elder Yeolshin offered if he can come with her in the Jeongan mountain and strongly recommended that. When the protagonist was about to decline the offer, Elder Yeolshin interjected and told him that she intended to recommend him to become the disciple of their sect leader. They were surprised upon hearing it. The protagonist was confused, but the elder told him that it is highly possible if it's him. The protagonist knows that being the disciple of the Jeongan sect leader, who is one of the top 10 swordsmen in the world, would bring great honor to him, and he can learn an absolute sword technique, but he still politely declines it. He apologized to the elder Yeolshin, but she told him not to worry about it, and she just simply wants to have someone talented joining them, the same with how the leader of the Tyrant Sword tribe wants. The protagonist still apologizes to her again, and suddenly asks a question. The protagonist said, since the elder is one of the few older people among the noble races, he asked her if she knew about any method to get the fruit of the world tree. The fruit of the world tree is being protected by the leader of the Desolate Fortress. It is a treasure from heaven, where if you eat the fruit, it will give you eternal life and youth. The protagonist intended to eat this fruit, hoping that this might extend his lifespan. The elder said that she doesn't have any authority over the world tree, and she knows that the leader of the Desolate Fortress can give it to other people. This made the protagonist choose the Desolate Fortress more, since he doesn't have any other way, and plans to become the divine sword leader, and accumulate great feats so that he might get a chance to obtain that fruit. When Elder Yeolshin was about to leave, he orders the 2 martial masters, Cliff Swordsman and Neutral Spirit Fist, to help clean up the area. After some time, they were done with the burial of all the dead people in their clan. When the protagonist was about to leave, he thanked the two martial masters for the help that they provided. At that moment, his brother called him and told him that he regretted all that was happening in the past, and an apology won't cut anything that they have done to him. He promised to be an older brother to him when they meet again, and hope that the protagonist will survive. The protagonist told him a harsh reality, that his older brother is not that exceptional from what he sees, and told him to train harder like his life depends on it. While Hea was sad, the protagonist told his brother to protect her at all costs. The protagonist also asks the chief steward on where he is going now. He tells the protagonist that he will go to the branches of the Jeong clan around Nanyang and look after the assets of the Jeong clan, since the bloodline of the clan is still alive. Since the protagonist knows that the chief steward knows martial arts, Yunshin knows that he will be of help to the clan. When the protagonist was about to leave, he told the steward to live a comfortable life and to take care of himself. This made the chief steward shocked because this is the first time that he heard this phrase from any descendants of the Jeong clan, including the previous patriarch. In the busy streets of Shenyang, the protagonist finally arrived at the place where the Desolate Fortress is located. In a restaurant, he overhears people praising the Desolate Fortress for having people from all over the place gather there to have their dream come true. They also mentioned that it was chaotic, since many martial artists are gathering to enter the entrance exam held by the Desolate Fortress. Upon hearing it, the protagonist wonders if there was such a thing as an entrance exam happening now. At that moment, there is another man standing in front of him, asking if the protagonist is here for the entrance exam also. He introduced himself as Heon Wanchang from Shaanxi, and the protagonist also introduced himself as he was from Xinye County. Heon Wanchang was surprised to know a martial artist that is nearby, and concluded that his journey must have been easy. He told the protagonist that he fought green forest bandits and pirates from the pirate fortress just to get there. The protagonist also remembered his journey fighting bandits, and told him that his journey was indeed easy. Heon Wanchang asks him to become friends and share information about the test. When the protagonist asks him if there were tests, Heon Wanchang was in disbelief about the protagonist not knowing the Desolate Fortress trial. He told the protagonist that the Desolate Fortress is different from other martial arts groups. They had a test for joining their group. The Desolate Fortress provides teaching even if you have foundation or not. That is why every martial artist is swarming to join there, and other people learn any martial arts just to pass the test. The Desolate Fortress is also known as the strongest martial art group in the world. There is a famous saying that, if you want to take over the world with one weapon, go to the Desolate Fortress, since the imperial family that rules over the Central Plains are doing everything they can to control the martial arts group, and all the elixirs and advanced martial arts that gathered around the world are waiting in that place. Wanchang was angry hearing other people saying that it is better on great sect with tradition. He also criticized other people thinking that martial groups created by commoners are better than Desolate Fortress. He also mentioned that almost nobody was able to pass the test in Desolate Fortress in one try, and this also wasn't his first try. Wanchang kept on talking while the protagonist reacted nonchalantly, and when he invited the protagonist to join him take the exam tomorrow, the protagonist just answered yes quickly. Wanchang keeps on blabbering nonsense, while the protagonist thought that he was just glad if he could join Desolate Fortress by passing the test, since he doesn't know where his mother's family lives, or what they look like. In the morning, the protagonist, Yun Xin, and Heon Wanchang are now at the gate of Desolate Fortress. At the trial site, the protagonist was given number 13. He looked around and saw that there were already other martial artists waiting for the start of the test. The first exam was that the supervisor needs to accept your plaque to pass the exam, and you will fail when the supervisor asks you to return your plaque to the reception. The second exam is a tournament, and the third exam is an interview with the Desolate Fortress's lord. Some martial artists come to Yangyang just to get a chance for them to have a conversation with an absolute master like the Desolate Fortress's lord, and find it as an incredible opportunity itself. They hope to receive some kind of profound understanding of martial arts or life itself. When the test started, the supervisor explained to the participants that the first exam is about swift sword art, and they need to demonstrate one swing of their fastest sword technique that they learned, and the supervisor will judge it. Because of his nervousness, Heon Wanchang was the first to volunteer, knowing that you only need to show a fast sword technique. The protagonist thought that it was simple enough. When Heon Wanchang started, he emitted a well-polished spirit. While concentrating, he swiftly unsheathed his sword and swung it. In front of the supervisor, the onlookers were pretty impressed about his sword swing. Heon Wanchang was nervous looking at the supervisor, and the supervisor told him to hand over his plaque, making him pass the first exam. After that, the protagonist was the next to go, while Wanchang said good luck to him. The surrounding people were impressed on how young the protagonist is, and thought that there was no way he could pass the exam, and this is only for him to gain some experience. When the protagonist was in front of the supervisor, and signaled the start of the test, he released a strong aura, and swung his sword so fast that other people couldn't see how the sword was being swung. All the people watching, including the supervisor, were shocked at how fast the sword technique that they saw. Other people didn't even know that it was already finished, and even Heon Wanchang was shocked. The supervisor asked him to hand over his plaque, and he also passed the exam while the supervisor thought that he would be the future of Desolate Fortress. When the protagonist was leaving the exam area, the people around him kept looking at him. Then his new friend asked if the protagonist was a son of a famous family. The protagonist just told him that it doesn't change anything. When you enter the Desolate Fortress, all that matters is your martial arts, talent, and effort. When his new friend asks him if he really wants to pass the exam, the protagonist just answers him that everyone here has that same goal of passing the exam, including his new friend. Upon hearing it, Wanchang has now realized what he needed to do, and Yeonshin just hopes that his new friend can pass the second exam. After passing the first exam, Yeonshin keeps on with his training since there are still 3 weeks to go before the second exam starts. And since the second exam is about a fight between other participants, it is best to train more. And he trained a lot of Jeong clan's movement arts and rapid sword, as well as his scripture of origin ability. 3 weeks later, the second exam is about to start. While they are gathering, the people whose tasks for the exam told them to wait outside and go inside once their number is called. The participants felt discouraged seeing the white martial outfit of the Desolate Fortress, which signifies elementary-level martial artists, and felt their strong energy. This means that even if you are wearing white in Desolate Fortress, you will still have a guaranteed promising future. When Wanchang and Yeonshin saw each other, they talk about their improvements and accomplishment during the past 3 weeks. Wanchang also tell Yeonshin that winning in this exam is not a guaranteed pass. The most important thing is for the participant to catch the eyes of the Desolate Fortress master, which means that even if you win, you might still fail the exam. There is also a problem with today's exam supervisors having a higher standard than before. It is because they heard that the White Keelin is competing for today's trial. White Keelin was an infamous martial artist who wiped out a notorious group of bandits even before the age of 15. He also beheaded the Shrouded Assassin, a swordmaster of an unorthodox faction. There are even rumors that when he was only still 18, he defeated all up and rising fighters at the 8 Families Dragon and Phoenix tournament. The question Yeonshin wanted to ask is, why does he want to join the Desolate Fortress when he is already a young fighter from a renowned Namgung family? The answer was that White Keelin is born from a concubine, which means that he can't become the patriarch, and if you rise up to the position of the Desolate Fortress Lord's captain, you will have the same or more power than a patriarch of the 8 great families. This is because the Desolate Fortress maintains the order of the Jeonhu in the center of the Central Plains. After that, the exam started and they called the protagonist. The protagonist bids farewell and good luck to Wanchang, hoping he can see him again. Inside the hall, many martial artists from the Desolate Fortress watching the fight, Yeonshin took a look at his opponent, and the supervisor signaled the start of the fight. His opponent was laughing hard, mocking the protagonist, and boasting that he can win this fight easily. But when he was about to introduce himself, he was smacked in the face by the unsheathed sword of the protagonist. This attack dented his face, broke his teeth, and threw him to the ground while making his opponent unconscious. The protagonist was speechless and won the fight while the opponent was dragged off by the medics team. While the crowd didn't have a great response to the victory, White Keelin took a step forward and wanted to fight the protagonist. The surrounding Desolate Fortress martial artists are now looking forward to the fight and wondered who will take the White Keelin, and thought that many squad leaders are going to be fighting just to get him to their squad. When the protagonist overheard what the surrounding people were talking about and mentioned the name of the White Keelin, Namgung Hwashin, the protagonist now knew who he was fighting right now. When the protagonist looks at his opponent, he looks to be 5 years older than him, and it doesn't seem that the White Keelin is at the level he can't reach, and thanks to his family's martial arts, it seems that the protagonist is much fit than him, but he is below in his opponent in other aspects. When the fight was about to start, Namgung Hwashin introduced himself first, and he told the protagonist that he mainly uses the Boundless Heaven technique and the Infinite Steps. The protagonist also introduces himself and tells him that he trained the movement arts from his Jeong clan. The White Keelin wondered and asked the protagonist if he was going to use his sword. The protagonist just took an attacking stance, while holding his sword and not saying a word. When Hwashin saw it, he understood that they were about to start the fight, and unsheathed his sword while releasing a strong aura around his sword. The protagonist's main essence of the technique that he practiced recently is unpredictability. It is an unexpected main attack in the midst of an unpredictable rhythm. It should be able to bring his guard down when his attack works efficiently. The tension rose and the fight began. At that very moment, there was a sword that broke, and it turned out that it was from Yeonshin attacking Hwashin, so fast that Hwashin barely managed to block the attack. Hwashin was fairly shocked about the attack, and the surrounding people were quiet and speechless. The other martial artist was confused and thought that the white Qilin won the fight, and was impressed by the delightful sword, while others who clearly saw what happened and even the white Qilin were shocked. Eventually, white Qilin admitted that he lost. The others who didn't fully grasp what happened were confused, but the ones who saw it were impressed about the protagonist even at his younger age, and also wondered if the protagonist can't still use his true energy in his techniques, and were looking forward to how stronger he will become in the future. The supervisor called the protagonist and told him to go to a garden north from here and be on standby. Before the protagonist leaves, he first greets Hwashin and that he would love to have another duel with him, same with Hwashin, who is also looking forward to that to happen. When the protagonist arrives at the garden, he notices that there were already participants who passed the second exam and was also waiting. When they notice the protagonist, they can't believe that someone as young as the protagonist passed the exam and thought that Namgung Hwashin would get in first. At this moment, the protagonist remembered the fight earlier. He knew that there was no chance of winning the fight, so he used his most extreme form of delightful sword as soon as the duel began. But because Hwashin imbued his sword with his true energy, his sword broke. It was his failure to use his delightful sword rashly. But for Hwashin to admit defeat at the end, it shows the nobleness of a renowned family. The protagonist couldn't learn true energy because of his Jeong clan being a third-rate branch clan in Shinxi County. The moment he witnessed how it was done, he now knew how to use true energy. He just thought that it was very simple as putting his energy into his sword. He will use his energy as a medium to become one with his sword. At that moment, the surrounding people notice the changes in the protagonist's aura and are shocked to see a sword resonation happening right in front of their eyes, and couldn't believe it because the protagonist is so young. The protagonist felt the sensation when the sword and the body united, and guessed that it is body-sword unification. When the protagonist woke up from his trance state, he heard a person congratulating him, and he saw White Colleen, Namgun Hwashin, standing there beside him, as if protecting him from anyone interrupting his enlightenment. When the protagonist notices it, he immediately thanks Hwashin for protecting him, and also congratulates him for passing the exam. When Hwashin heard him, he was amused and laughed for no particular reason. He also saw Wanchang passing, and congratulated him also. Wanchang suddenly asked Yeonshin if he knew that he had gotten a nickname. Yeonshin was puzzled by it, because mostly receiving a nickname only comes when someone has shown an exceptional martial prowess, or has attracted attention, and most nicknames represents huge honor to martial artists. The protagonist wondered how he could get a nickname when all he did was take a trial, and Hwashin told him that he is now nicknamed as Lightning Genius, the talent of light. If even the martial artists from the Desolate Fortress are calling him that, it's basically what the Jianghu will call him now. When the protagonist heard it, he was skeptical, and thought if they were just mocking him for being young, who's just a little fast on his sword. But Hwashin sarcastically asked if it was really a little fast. If so, how should they call Hwashin if he himself was having a hard time defending it? The protagonist never thought that he would get a nickname Lightning Genius, a nickname he never ever dreamed of having when he was just doing a horse stance in Jeong Manor. A couple of moments later, the supervisor gathered all the participants who passed the second exam, and told them that they are now starting the final trial, and if they pass it, they will now be joining the Desolate Fortress. The protagonist is now excited to be meeting with the Desolate Fortress leader, and one of the strongest martial artists, and might even be the strongest. When the first person entered, he exited quickly within a moments later, and the participants thought that the Desolate Fortress leader was only looking at their faces, because it was just too quick of a meeting. Then a while later, there were other participants who exited with downcasted and sad expressions leaving the area. And then Jong Yeonshin was called. He entered the building and kept going to the top as told by the supervisor. When the protagonist was already at the top, he entered a room with a big door, and when he was inside, he noticed that there were plants and nature all around the room. Then he saw a person sitting on the couch, which is a woman of the noble race, and he immediately knew that it was the Desolate Fortress leader. The protagonist first introduced himself, and then at that moment, the leader looked at Yeonshin straight into his eyes. The leader of the Desolate Fortress told him that the protagonist was the child of a certain someone's bloodline. The protagonist was confused if the leader knew about his mother's family, and asked what bloodline she was talking about. The leader of the Desolate Fortress knew that the protagonist already knew what she was talking about, and thought that he was very bold. Then the protagonist admitted that he was the grandson of the former Divine Sword Squad leader, and the leader told him that his grandfather is about to become part of the Elder Council soon, and that he is someone who is very obstinate. And then the leader of the Desolate Fortress looked again at the protagonist, and told him that he has a wound, and the protagonist just told the leader that it was nothing to be concerned about, and it is just a trivial family matter, but the leader didn't agree, and told him that it is not trivial, and it is just covered by the protagonist's trained body. The leader even guessed that the protagonist was still 15 years of age, and it is also true that it is something that no outsider should be concerned of, and that it must be the kin who should resolve it. The protagonist apologized and thought about the transcendent air of someone with absolute power is a separate matter of her trying to interfere with his family matters. And then the leader stands up and tells the protagonist that he is an interesting fellow who never bows down even if he is here because he wants something. The protagonist was shocked that she knew that he was here because he wanted something, and thought that the leader might have found out that his Baihui acupoint is abnormally wide open. And then the protagonist asks the leader if he can still live, if he can eat the fruit of the world tree. The leader told him that even though the facts about the fruit are not entirely inaccurate, it is possible for him to get what he wants. The protagonist was glad to hear about it, and tried to ask if he could get it, and the leader told him that it depends on what he's going to do now. The protagonist said that it was enough for him and was thankful, and then the protagonist asks if he is now a martial artist of the Desolate Fortress. The leader of the Desolate Fortress confirmed, and told him to leave now. She even said that he will be the next Divine Sword Squad leader. While the protagonist was leaving, he thought that the leader of the Desolate Fortress might only be teasing him, or she really saw some potential in him, or maybe she was only telling him that he can only get the fruit if he will become the leader of the Divine Sword Squad. After a while later, there were only 4 participants who passed the trial. The martial master who is in charge of guiding them asks them if they know what kind of work the Desolate Fortress do. Wan Chang answered confidently, saying that it is to stop the Muram martial masters from overthrowing the imperial family. The guide didn't object to that answer, and said it was one of the major things that they do, but it was also not what they mainly do. It is to prevent or suppress a certain size of conflict from happening in the Jianghu, since no one can predict what would happen when a fight in Muram breaks out, and it once happened that there was a blood storm that swept across the Central Plains on the day that the Heavenly Demon's grave was discovered. It was only fine if the fight was only affecting those who coveted the manuals of ultimate martial arts or elixirs. But the grave and heinous deeds of those martial artists didn't care if they were affecting commoners or civilians. The empire becomes unrecognizable when you witness those hellish events. Wan Chang remembered the disaster of the Heavenly Demon's grave 17 years ago. The unorthodox and demonic sects aren't the only problems, including the orthodox groups, the 9 great sects, and the 8 great clans, would also become a problem. The people will only suffer if they leave them be. That is why the imperial family is providing the Desolate Fortress a huge amount of money, manuals, martial masters, and elixirs. After the explanation, the guide turns towards them and tells them that these are the things that they need to do while they are in the Desolate Fortress, and that they need to sever the heads of all martial artists that disrupts the lives of the normal people. After they arrived at the place that they will all be staying temporarily, the guide told them that they will be assigned to a place and be moved to the accommodations to that place. It has been a week since the protagonist was staying at the temporary place and was still waiting when Wan Chang entered and informed him that it has finally been decided on where they will be staying. And it was in the Radiant Demon Squad, a combat squad. Wan Chang also told the protagonist that there was a rumor that all 17 combat squad captains under the Divine Sword Squad were fighting each other just to take in the new warriors. The protagonist couldn't believe what he heard, and the reason for the fight was in order to recruit White Qilin and the Lightning Genius. On the next day at the arena of the Radiant Demon Squad, Wan Chang and Yunxin are now wearing the white robe of the Desolate Fortress, while being surrounded by the martial masters of the Radiant Demon Squad. And in front of them is the Radiant Demon Squad captain, Ma Jin. Seeing him in person tells them that the rumors about him being the strongest among all 17 captains seems to be true. The captain got close to them and tried to intimidate them, but the protagonist just casually greeted back the captain, and the captain was glad to see that the Lightning Genius has a backbone, since people like him don't die easily. The captain explains that the combat squad in the Desolate Fortress's Divine Squad is the same as one of the sects in the Central Plains. They will have to learn martial arts in the Radiant Demon Squad and execute missions, and he also introduces the seniors around them. Wan Chang then asks the squad captain if learning in the squad means that they also need to share their martial arts. The squad captain answers him by saying that they didn't have to share their own personal martial arts that they learn, and only the martial arts from the Radiant Demon Squad will be taught in the group. Upon hearing it, Wan Chang was so happy just to learn the martial arts from the Radiant Demon Squad. Yunshin also heard about the Radiant Demon Squad, since it is one of the most famous squads out of all of the 17 squads. They were able to fight with the Plum Blossom Swordsmen, the 24 elite swordsmen of the Manhwa sect, without any casualties. That incident also gave credibility to the rumors that the strongest martial group in the world is the Desolate Fortress. Even if the Desolate Fortress is affiliated with the Imperial family, attacking them doesn't constitute treason, so everyone in the Desolate Fortress needs to learn continuously and become stronger each day. The protagonist asks why it is not treason. The captain explains that the dignity of the Imperial family doesn't apply to the Desolate Fortress, because their job isn't like a government official's but to fight other martial artists, so if they don't want to die, they need to become much stronger. The captain called a guy who got slashed by the Namgung's strongest swordsman while out on a mission. The captain wants him to explain his experience with the king-style sword arts, which is known to be one of the strongest swordsmanship styles in the world, and it is also a supreme martial arts that can only be learned by the direct descendants of the Namgung clan. The protagonist was shocked to know that his senior survived from fighting the man known to be the strongest martial master of China. When his senior wants to begin by taking a look at the protagonist's exceptional swift sword attack, the protagonist then readied himself. He was releasing some aura and preparing to attack, while his senior was nonchalantly putting his sword at his shoulders. His senior then introduces himself as Chung Myung and was born in Shangyang, and when the protagonist introduces his name and place that he was born, Chung Myung was impressed that there are places that he didn't know have excellent martial artists. This will be the end of the first half of the translation. I will try to follow up the second half sooner. Hopefully. Thank you. And please don't forget to like and subscribe.